Hey there, I'm Kathy Brown, a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer, and I work with active women during and after menopause to find nutrition and wellness habits for a longer life, to have more energy, and to really just thrive beyond menopause. So, February is American Heart Month, and I thought this was as good a time as any to talk about the importance of taking care of our hearts, especially during and after the menopause transition. But really quickly, I want to tell a quick story. When I was in my 20s, I worked with this woman. She was in her 40s, she was really active, went to the gym all the time, seemed to eat healthy. She was out of work for a few days, and when she came back, she said she had had a heart attack. That was such a shock to everybody. I always thought of heart disease as something for old men, and she was blindsided as well. So when we started asking about the details, she said she was exercising and was suddenly just really out of breath. And this was an exercise that she did all the time and never felt out of breath like that. And she felt lightheaded. So she sat down and she had some water, and the feeling didn't go away. So she went to urgent care. I mean, again, she was completely blindsided. I think maybe she had some elevated cholesterol prior to this, but there had been no indications from her doctors that she was at risk of having a heart attack. And in fact, the signs and symptoms during her heart attack were so different from what we typically associate with heart attack symptoms, and they were so mild that the doctors at the acute care didn't even check her heart until after they had run a bunch of other tests and didn't come up with anything. So here's a few statistics about heart disease in women. One, heart disease is the leading cause of death for women in the United States, and it can affect women at any age. Let's let that sink in for a second. It is the leading cause of death for women in the United States. That's crazy. In fact, heart disease kills more women than all cancers combined. In 2021, it was responsible for the deaths of over 310,000 women, or about 1 in every 5 female deaths. 51.9%, that's over 50% of deaths from high blood pressure, which is also known as the silent killer because you often don't feel it coming, are women. Over 50% of high blood pressure deaths are women. Among women 20 years and older, 20 years and older, nearly 45% are living with some form of cardiovascular disease. So what does cardiovascular disease mean? Beyond just the obvious heart attacks, you have heart failure, where the heart is unable to effectively pump the blood throughout the body, so the heart is weak. Atherosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries, so those arteries are no longer elastic enough to respond to pressure in the arteries. Stroke, venous thrombosis, which is a clot in the vein. Arrhythmia, which is abnormal heartbeat or heart rate. Peripheral artery disease, so narrowing of the arteries in the extremities and the limbs. High cholesterol and or triglycerides, so elevated fat in the blood, and high blood pressure. These are all considered cardiovascular disease, and 45% of women are living with one or more of these. So as previously mentioned, heart disease can affect women at any age. However, the hormonal changes that we go through during menopause increase the risk for heart disease, or at least they can. Specifically, the loss of estrogen causes physiological changes that lead to increased abdominal fat, which we also know as visceral fat. That's the fat in between your organs that is considered dangerous. Impaired glucose regulation. So this isn't just insulin resistance. This can also be decreased insulin secretion when you eat and increased gluconeogenesis, which is when your liver produces sugar and releases it into the blood when blood sugar levels get too low. And your estrogen helps to regulate all of those things. So when we lose that estrogen, we have a harder time regulating our sugar levels. Okay, increased blood pressure, increased LDL or the bad cholesterol and triglycerides, and reduced HDL or the good cholesterol. So in order to offset the increased risks presented by your hormone changes, it's very important to maintain good habits for the lifestyle factors that you're actually able to control or have some level of control over. And those are going to include diet, exercise, getting enough sleep, and stress management. A heart healthy diet includes plenty of fiber. So the foods that are going to give you fiber are fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and lentils. You want to include lean sources of protein. So protein that is not high in saturated fat. So it's going to include things like poultry, seafood, dairy, tofu, and beans. And then you want to limit things like fast food, deep fried food, highly processed foods, and added sugars. These are all things that can lead to more risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, exercise. Exercise is also very, very important, and exercise has become kind of confusing for people in peri and postmenopause because you hear things like you have to lift and you shouldn't do cardio, and cardio causes increased cortisol, which increases belly fat. And the truth really kind of lies somewhere in the middle. Anybody who gives you some outrageous claims that you don't need cardio and you should only lift heavy, really kind of start asking questions. But what it comes down to is your exercise should include a combination of both strength and cardio exercise. You know, the strength training is going to help with bone and muscle maintenance, and the cardio is going to help keep that cardiovascular system strong. Exercise also helps to increase LDL cholesterol. And with regular exercise over time, your body actually becomes less reactive to stress, which is great. And that overall lowers your stress levels. It helps to reduce the risk for potential effects from chronic stress, like elevated blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, abdominal weight gain. And regular exercise also reduces insulin resistance. So very, very important to get both that diet and that exercise. They work hand in hand. All right, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about stress management and sleep, but I do want to touch on the importance of sufficient sleep and stress management for your overall health, including heart health. So sleep is that time when your body repairs and recovers, and chronic sleep deprivation can lead to a multitude of metabolic and health concerns. So try to get your 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. And if you're having trouble doing that on a consistent basis, maybe talk to your doctor because that sleep is so important for your health. Chronic stress also can result in a host of health concerns. Stress in and of itself is not necessarily bad. Stress is your body's reaction to something that needs a quick response from you. But when it becomes chronic and it doesn't go away when the threat or the issue is no longer present, then that can become a problem. Obviously, exercise, like we talked about, that helps steady your body's stress response. And so that's great to help with stress management, but it's also important to have tools for day-to-day stresses that arise, things like breathing exercises, meditation, anything that calms the noise of stress. Now, it's also important to know the signs and symptoms of heart attack and stroke for women, because those signs and symptoms aren't necessarily exactly the same as the ones for men. And unfortunately, the research that led to what we look for in heart attack and stroke, the research on heart disease has largely been on male participants. And so it's really important to get the word out what to look for in women specifically. And some of these are similar to male symptoms, but some of them are not. So for heart attack, you want to look for, or I should say rather, a lot of times the symptoms that present for women include uncomfortable pressure, squeezing, fullness, or pain in the center of your chest that lasts more than a few minutes or goes away and comes back. Number 2 is pain or discomfort in one or both arms, neck, jaw, or stomach. It's a little different than for men because it can be either side, but we always think of, for men, it's pain on the left side radiating down. Shortness of breath with or without chest discomfort. Other signs such as breaking out into a cold sweat, nausea, or lightheadedness. And then, it's important to note that this isn't an exhausted list. During my day job, I work with a lot of people with cardiac disease, and women often say that they didn't really have any strong symptoms at all. One woman told me it was just like somebody was tapping her on the shoulder, and it kept coming back. And then other women tell me that they just have an overwhelming feeling that something is wrong, like a little bit of feeling of anxiousness. So the key takeaway here is, if anything feels off, get checked out. All right, so the signs of stroke are sudden numbness or weakness of the face, arm, or leg, especially on one side of the body. Sudden confusion, trouble speaking or understanding. Sudden trouble seeing or blurred vision in one or both eyes. Sudden trouble walking, dizziness, loss of balance or coordination, or sudden severe headache with no known cause. Okay, I hope that you never need to know this information for yourself or for your loved ones, but it is good to have it just in case. All right, I'm going to keep this short. I don't want to ramble on too much because I'm going to turn this into a 2-part series. And the next video, we will dive into fiber and why fiber is so, so, so important for your heart, and more specifics on how to make sure you're getting enough fiber in your diet. So if you are looking for a community of other women going through the same things you are, come on over to my Facebook group. It's called Fit, Fearless, and Fed Women Run the World, and request to join. There's a couple of questions and then I'll let you in. I try to keep it private so that there's no trolls. And until next time, thank you.